Hello, my name is Ted Gardner, and I'm an interviewer with the Public Library of Cincinnati and Hamilton County. I'm interviewing James Purdue on June the 14th, which is Flag Day, 2007, at the main library. And James Purdue has a wonderful name with a great university next door. But our camera operator today is Dennis Daly of the History Department of our public library downtown, which is a wonderful, wonderful repository for researchers and scholars and just people interested in history. So we're going to talk with James Purdue. And James, it's just wonderful to have you here. You've already expressed why you're here, and that helps a lot because sometimes some people don't quite have a clear notion, but you certainly do. And I'd like to find out, first of all, where were you born?
Well, I was born in Indianapolis, Indiana.
Okay.
And my father was named Claire, called me Dick Purdue. My mother was Ethel Lindsley. Lindsley, she was from Illinois.
I see.
My birthday is April 28th, 1917, which means I just passed 90.
Well, I should say congratulations.
Another reason for being here.
Well, congratulations, that's wonderful. Anybody that enters the decade, it's really special. All right. Well, what did you, what about your family?
Well, my what?
Your family. Did you
let me give you a little bit more about my
your parents?
Earlier days.
Okay.
I didn't have any brothers or sisters, but my father passed away when I was 11.
Oh, my.
And my mother, as a police, in 1928, had a business still, so she got a job in Cincinnati with an uncle who was an executive at the Cincinnati Central YMCA. I spent the 11th to 16th at the Indiana Masonic Home, which is in Franklin, Indiana. Home,
yeah.
So I don't have anymore. And I was there for 5 years, 11 to 16.
Wow.
And then I came here to Cincinnati and got a job with the Union Central Life, $10 a week. And I worked for them for actually about 17 years.
So you knew the founder of Union Central, huh?
Oh, W. Howard Cox was the head man when I was there, yeah. And Jerome Clark and all the other old money.
Right. Well, then you went, where did you go to school? I mean, you went to school. You had those formative years, 11 to 16.
High school was at the Masonic Home.
It was at the Masonic Home, too?
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, the Masonic Home had the widows and orphans of Indiana Masons. Yeah. There were about 120 boys and slightly less number of girls, and I don't know how many old folks. And we had our own school. And I went there from 8th grade through high school.
How about that? And
when you graduate, you're supposed to leave. So in '33, I came back to Cincinnati and got my job with Union Central.
I see.
So
your mother was working in town too?
Yes, she was there. So I worked for Union Central for, like I say, 17 years. And in the meanwhile, I went to UC at night, which is the hard way to get a college education.
Yes.
And then in '42, I was drafted. I had deferment because I was deferring my mother. Now it held me off a year, otherwise I would have been in '41.
Mm-hmm.
I was in '42, Fort Thomas. I went to the 99th Infantry Division, which, by the way, I stayed at through my whole career, which is probably unusual.
I should say. Now, the 99th was basically Midwesterners, wasn't it?
Pennsylvania, mostly.
Pennsylvania.
The draftees are mostly...
Was that the Keystone?
No, this was the blue and white checkerboard. I got a patch in my stuff.
All right.
I was sent to the 99th Infantry Division, even though I was accepted into the military for limited service. And my mother called up and said, "Where'd you send my boy?" And they said, "Well, we can't tell you where, but we can tell you she's in the infantry division." Infantry, he's limited service because of bad eyesight.
I see.
But that didn't seem to make any difference to the Army. Incidentally, later on, jumping ahead, when it came time for our division to go overseas, my captain called me in and he said, Purdue, he said, you're limited service. I said, yeah. He said, well, you don't have to go overseas if you don't want to, you know. Well, like a ignorance, patriotic, I said, well, that don't make any difference, so I went overseas. But so in spite of the fact that I was in service, I was a combat infantryman.
How about that? Where did you get your basic training?
We went originally to Cotton Field down in Mississippi, called Camp Van Dorn, which was just the new camp.
Right.
Got some pictures. We were there until, well, I gotta look here a minute. I got a timeline here I'll leave with you if you want. But,
good for you. Very helpful.
well, actually, we were there until about that fall. We went through basic training. I was assigned to the Division Signal Officer's office.
Mm-hmm.
The Division Signal Officer's job is to provide communication from the general to his units, the infantry division, regiments, the battalion, the artillery, and everything. He's the communications chief. And I worked in that office. My job initially was cryptographic clerk.
Oh.
I ran the code machines.
Hmm.
And we went through basic training. One of my chief accomplishments during basic training was I qualified with the M1 rifle. And with my bad eyesight, I never fired a gun before. That was a real achievement for me to be able to qualify with a gun.
Gosh, that's great.
And we went through basic training in Louisiana and Texas. After, among other things, building the camps, which was just, well, just tar barracks, you know.
Sure.
We spent the first month or so regrading the place so that when it rained, or rained a lot in Mississippi, didn't have the barracks. Did a lot of that as well as basic training.
That was your accommodations were the wooden sides with the canvas tops?
I got pictures. It gets cold in Mississippi in the wintertime, believe it or not. And we had 2 cast iron stoves, you know. And those suckers would get red hot to keep the barracks warm.
Yeah.
But the danger was fire. So we had a monitor every night, stay up all night, making sure that the furnaces didn't overheat and burn the place down. Because we had parenthetically 2 amusement centers. What do you call them? Not PXs.
Oh.
Anyway.
Yeah, canteens.
Yeah, when we showed movies and they had dances and stuff,
Sure.
2 of them burned down while we were at camp.
For heaven's sake.
So
That's
fire was not the least of our concerns.
pretty hot spot, huh?
Hot stuff. So then we, this is now about the fall of 43. About that time, the military in Europe needed replacements. So they took about 1/3 of our division out of the division for replacements. And they filled that gap with, remember ASTP, Army Specialist Training Program?
Yeah.
They disbanded ASTP about that time. And we got about 3,000 ASTP guys who had been sitting in a classroom all day. And now he's running the infantry division, filling out our division.
Wow.
So that took until about, November 43. And then we moved to Camp Maxey. And we finished the training there at Camp Maxey, which is in Paris, Texas.
Oh, in Texas.
Northeast Texas.
Oh, yeah.
And let's see here. In
Is that where you learn combat maneuvers and things like that?
yeah, well, we learned part of that at, actually, what really happened is we went through basic training twice.
Oh, you did?
Those of us that, we went to Camp Maxey in May. I can't remember here now. Anyway,
Of course, you traveled by train.
yeah, I got it down here somewhere. Anyway, we stayed in Camp Maxey until September the 11th. And then we went, this would be 44 now. No?
43.
44. Now, wait a minute. All right. Well, let's see here.
Well,
Well, 44. September 11th, 44.
44.
Yeah.
So you went in 42.
Oh, wait a minute, 43.
Yeah.
Wait a minute. Well, I knew I was going to get that screwed up.
Well, let's
I
work
can't
back
read
a
it.
little bit. When
Let's see.
when did
We're
you?
42, 43 was both basic training at Van Dorn and finishing up in the fall of 43.
43.
At Maxey.
At Maxey. Okay.
Now, at Maxey, we stayed there until 40, I got here 44. We left Camp Maxey in 44.
Early 44.
Yeah, 44.
Yeah.
And
So
we
you had 2 winters in the South.
Yeah, yeah. We went to Camp Miles Standish in Boston.
Now this was traveling by train.
By train.
Okay.
You wouldn't believe the train.
I do.
Oh,
I rode it myself.
Oh, no, wait a minute. This one had paneled walls and gas lights in the car.
Oh my God, a castle.
This was real oldie.
Wow, they really hauled that out of the archives,
They
didn't
sure
they?
did. And we went to Camp Miles Standish near Boston. We were there a couple of days. We sailed for Europe. We sailed for Le Havre originally, aboard the USS George W. Goethals, after the famous surgeon down in Panama.
Sure.
It had been a fruit boat down, but it was a pretty big ship. It was bigger than,
Banana boat.
I think it was about 10,000 tonner, pretty good.
Uh-huh.
But we didn't wind up in Le Havre because at that time they had what they called the Red Ball Express going in Europe.
Yes.
They needed supplies and stuff to reinforce the drive to the Rhine River. And they had day and night trucks going from Le Havre to the front carrying supplies. Run day and night.
Right.
And they had a big jam of supplies at Le Havre. So we went to Liverpool instead of Le Havre, and went then from there down to a place in southwestern England called Shillingstone, which is near Salisbury in the southwestern part of England. And we were there for about 4 weeks. And what we did there mainly was work. We took a 2.5-ton truck and we built it up as an office, because by this time I was a message center chief, and I had the guys who kept track of where the telephone lines were. The guys kept track of the radio codes. The guys kept track of the cryptographic codes, etc. All of which had to be sent out to the troops. Well, I think it was a weekly basis. So we had to have a place to do that. So we outfitted a 2.5 with the tables that you could bolt the typewriter to, and tables you could put the mimeograph machine to, and all in all, as best we could do.
Now, you hadn't gotten married before you went overseas, had you?
And what?
You hadn't gotten married
No.
before you went overseas?
No.
Okay, all right. So there you were in Southwest England, huh?
Yeah, so then we shipped across the channel, and we went to Belgium to reserve, which would be early 45. Right?
Well,
No, wait a minute.
see, the Battle of the Bulge was in December,
Yeah,
December of 44.
yeah, okay. We went across the channel in November of 44.
Okay,
We crossed the channel on the day that FDR was elected for his 4th term. I remember that. And we went immediately into the line up at the Ardennes
yes.
because they were guiding the troops to the Rhine push, and they didn't have enough to cover everybody, so they covered the Ardennes thinly because the Germans would never attack through there. Of course, the last 4 times the Germans attacked the French, they attacked through the Ardennes, but that doesn't make any difference.
Famous last words.
Yeah, famous last words. So we sat down in a nice quiet sector from the middle of November until December 16th. And the Germans attacked with all their force down the very road. The main road of attack had the 99th Infantry Division on the right side and the 104th, I think it was, on the left. They came right down that road with Panzer tanks, of which they have some pictures.
Sure.
And, well, as we say, we made a strategic draw with to previously prepared defensive positions. That means we got the hell out of there.
Yeah, right.
Okay.
Before you got your tail whacked.
Yeah. I can remember going to the general's office because my colonel, who was a officer, had access to the operating maps. I went there with Colonel Kelsey, and I can remember seeing possible tank sighting here, which is behind where we were, possible tank sightings here, and one road out behind.
Wow.
I remember thinking to myself, not being a military expert, this doesn't look good to me. Well, as a matter of fact, they never did encircle us to the right, but they encircled the division that was next to us to the left. We diverted them south.
Yes.
And that was the shoulder of the bulge. I was right there.
Right.
So we sit there in not very good conditions while the weather was terrible. The Air Force couldn't fly.
I know.
And
were you affected physically by the cold? Frostbite?
no.
Fingers?
Well, we had it pretty good. I wasn't a trench type soldier. We slept in the truck.
Right.
And the general and the colonel would usually find a building to set up the message center, and we could sleep in the building, on the floor in the cart,
Sure.
and a
Well, that was fortunate.
fart sack, but
You were on the inside. That's
yeah.
good.
so I never had that much of it. But it was bad enough as it was. It was cold, very
Terrible
cold.
conditions, yeah.
The weather was terrible from about the 17th of December till, 10 days. And they managed to slow them down, and then when the air cleared, the Air Force managed to knock them all out. And basically what happened is the Germans really ran out of gasoline.
Yes.
Their objective had always been to come down that road, go up to Liège and Antwerp and get to port. So they get access to all the gasoline and stuff they wanted.
Right.
They never did do that, partly because I diverted them south. And then they went down to Bastogne. Everybody knows about Bastogne. But they never did accomplish their objectives. But I can remember vividly the day, it was about, I don't know, it was about 4 or 5 days after Christmas, I guess, when the skies cleared and the Air Force bombers came over. And all these GIs were standing looking up saying, "Get them, boys, get them!" It was a really interesting
Say, what a great sight.
So,
when you were there, did you hear about the massacre at
yeah.
Malmedy?
Well, we'll get to Malmedy in a minute, okay?
Okay, good.
We were right there.
I'll be
We were at a place called Camp Elsenborn. And Malmedy was maybe a matter of 10 miles away.
Wow.
Those were the days that the Germans sent over a lot of guys who were English-speaking Germans, dressed in American uniforms,
Yep.
to do what they could. They turn the street signs around, you know, and
Sure.
do all the sabotage they could.
Sure.
And
Sabotage.
one of the ways that the GIs combated that was with sports questions. If you were an American GI and you didn't know who the hell Babe Ruth was, you were in trouble. Because they say, you know, who was, Babe Ruth? What did Lou Gehrig do?
Yeah.
What sport did such and such a person play? And if the guy you were talking to didn't know that, he had some explaining to do.
Right.
But it was interesting. That's the basic tool that we use to smoke out the people who.
I know, that was ingenious. That was wonderful.
And
great stories about that.
Malmedy was about 10 miles away, and that was where they rounded up the GIs and shot them.
Yep, terrible.
Which is slightly illegal under the Geneva rules.
Well, and it was, as I've read about it, I was in the Pacific all the time. As I read about it, it inspired the Americans, you know, we're gonna make up for that, dirty rats.
Well, let's see.
So there you were in, now you were inside, I mean, you
I
were,
was spent most of my time in buildings.
yeah, but you were, I mean, you were on the end, you knew what was being planned or what the strategy was, or maps and so forth.
To the extent that the signal officer was privileged to the operation map of G3. Yes. My guys kept track of where our troops were. And the guys that laid the wire, we had the maps.
Sure.
The signal corps operating instructions or radio frequencies and stuff, we knew where everybody was. So in that sense, we had even though I was just a sergeant, I never did make, I made it up to technical sergeant on the way up or all the way down, one of the two. I'll explain that in a minute. But to the extent that we did that kind of thing, we knew what was going on more than the average guy. But like I said, I wasn't in the trench in the front lines. Like, I wasn't a combat infantryman, really.
I understand, sure.
The division officers, signal officers, ordinarily maybe 5-6 miles behind the front lines. Not close enough to have them drop a mortar in their pocket. Although that comes later. Let's see, where are we? Battle of the Bulge. We were there until February, when things quieted down. We went back to R&R at the same place we'd gone into the line, Albel, Belgium, for about a week. And then we were sent south along the Rhine to a place called Irf Canal, which we were supposed to help take. But in the meanwhile, one of the armored divisions had captured that bridge across the Rhine at Remagen. And so we were sent down there to help secure that. And we got down there the day after they got the bridge. Mm-hmm. The bridge was damaged. They weren't sending very many things across the bridge because it looked like it was going to fall down. So they made pontoon bridges and crossed. The Germans were, with what little bit of Air Force they had, were trying to bomb that place. Sure. So it was hot and heavy there for a while. But that part of Germany is kind of like Cincinnati. It's flat, more or less flat Kentucky, and then the hills. Yeah. And the bridge that the Germans failed to destroy was a railroad bridge that went off the flat into the hill, the tunnel. And so there were two things: to hold the bridge and expand the bridgehead and to fix the bridge. Well, somebody says the engineers didn't do a very good job because eventually the bridge collapsed into the Rhine. Guys said he took out one too many bolts or something. But in the meanwhile, we managed to get across the river. Well, from then on, we were mostly just mopping up.
Sure. So you went across the bridge, huh?
I went across the bridge on the third day.
How about that?
Across the pontoon bridge on the third day,
Yeah.
Now we were there. Now there was a case where we were in close proximity with the enemy. We were in this building. We'd set up a message center. And am I talking too fast?
No.
Is that okay?
You're doing fine.
There's a message center in this big stone building. And we're got things going, and there's about 5 guys that got this other corner of this basement of the building. And every once in a while they get up and leave and to come back. So finally I said to the sergeant, I said, "What the hell are you guys doing?" I said, "Where do you go?" "Oh," he says, "Oh, we got a mortar set up in the backyard and we go out and shoot it off every once in a while." Well, you know, mortars are frontline troops, or frontline weapons. A division signal officer clerk doesn't normally run into a mortar shell.
No, I should say not.
But I also, while I was there, I also saw a German rocket plane. The first plane we ever saw without propellers.
Right.
Now this wasn't a jet. This was a rocket plane. The Germans were working on that at a experimental Air Force base close by to Remagen. They had a limited range. They could only fly about, 100 miles radius because of the nature of its rocket fuel and stuff like that. But it was kind of strange to look up and see this guy fly along, no engine, no propellers.
Well, they were pioneers in that sort of thing, boy, oh boy.
But that was they had that place surrounded. It was kind of like downtown Cincinnati. They had all the hills around Remagen were full of these 2.5s with quad-mounted 50 caliber machine guns. And they must have had 100 of them, 50, I don't know. Whenever a German airplane came over, there was a hail of lead that went up from that place like you wouldn't believe.
Wow.
Just you could probably walked on it,
Sure.
But that didn't last too long. So then, from there, we were transferred to the 3rd Army, Patton's Army, had been in the 1st Army, because they were coming up from the south, and the rest of it was pretty much mop up in terms of, I've got a sheet here, I'm going to leave it, all the little towns that we went through. After that, I'll just give you a reading here. It says, let's see, April 1st, Gemunden, 5th, Schwarzenau, 7th, Kingshausen, 10th, Wolfshausen, Munzig.
Just dinky little villages, weren't they?
Yeah, just little villages. The only thing I remember about that is we went into this one place, and this German guy, he said he'd be a hero, so he was a sniper from the church steeple.
Right.
So, the guy with the artillery gun just shot the tower off. Took care of that.
Yeah. Did you see a lot of destruction in these towns and villages you passed through?
Not in those. The Central Europe part was pretty much untouched.
Right.
We actually, what happened is we just went from the lower or upper Rhine around there down in a southeasterly direction toward Austria.
Right.
When the war ended, I was out at a place called Linz, Austria.
Oh yeah.
We crossed the Danube on my birthday.
How about that?
And on May 5th, we were in, I forget where it was.
So you went across. You went across southern Germany.
Yeah. I was trying to see where was I when the war was over.
Well, let's see. VE Day was May.
Oh, VE Day was on May 8th.
May 8th.
I was there at
1945,
at Giesenhausen.
Giesenhausen.
Okay.
Everything's a housing.
Yeah, now, so then the war ended. So we first went to a camp this permanent camp that had been used by the Germans as anti-aircraft battalion. A permanent barracks, courtyard, rooms, beds, you know.
Wow.
And we were there for about couple of months till August from when did we go to Hetzler's?
Now,
Well, we left Kitzingen. Kitzingen is the name of the camp. Kitzingen. And we stayed there until the 8th of August, all summer pretty much.
and what were you doing there at that time?
Nothing.
Just sitting. Yeah.
Which is, had a pass to Paris from there, 3-day pass to Paris,
Good. Good. Good.
which was financed with 20 cartons of cigarettes, which the government gave out as a daily ration, which I didn't smoke, so I accepted them and I sold them in the black market for, as near as I can remember, it was around $200. Of course, that's what they cost today.
Sure.
And that financed my trip to Paris,
Well, that's wonderful.
3-day Paris.
Did you have any, or were you near any of the infamous concentration camps? Or
Well,
anything?
no,
No.
not until later. Actually, on a business trip for GE, I went to Dachau.
Did you really?
Oh.
That would have been, what, 1950s?
Well, when I was at Dachau, which was what, 1970
1950s?
something, there were quite a few German people visiting.
Mm-hmm.
And that place has an atmosphere which you can't really describe. You go out and you see these foundations, and you see where the prisoners of war were kept, and they got one barracks that shows how the buildings were, how the cots were, where they stacked them up. But it's mostly just ground and ruins and the ovens.
Right.
But there's a feel in the air that something bad happened here, you know?
Yes.
Even if you didn't know that, if you walked into Dachau, you'd think, gee, there's something spooky about this place.
Yeah, something.
That's the impression I had.
Yes, yes. I think that was pretty much a universal feeling of people
Well,
I've talked to who
yeah.
said the same thing.
That would have been in the mid-70s that I was there.
Oh, I see. You were with GE then, huh?
Yeah, I'll get to that later.
Yeah.
Anyway, we left Kitzingen and we went to, how much time I got here?
Oh, we got another
I got plenty of
20
time.
minutes,
Okay.
25 minutes.
Okay. We left Kitzingen for what I call the mud hole. They had a place where they concentrated the guys that were going to go home.
Mm-hmm.
If you recall, there was a point system.
Yeah, oh yeah.
And it seems to me it was something like 85 points. And most of the guys in my division had enough to go home, but I didn't, I forget why. But I had signed all of the code documents for the European ETO, and somebody had to sign off on them for the division to go home, so I was declared, quote, indispensable.
Mm-hmm.
So we went from the division and the other people that were going home with it. They used the 9900s as the organizational structure. They brought in other people that had enough points to go home.
Right.
And the people that didn't got kicked out, but I was not kicked out because of this code thing. So we went down, they were assembled there, and it was a mud hole. It was just a place out in the field, you know.
Gosh.
Well, it was almost as bad as the mud in Belgium. Anyway, we were there this says about 12 days. It seems like longer than that. And then we shipped down to Marseille, port home, to go home. And when we got to Marseille, some idiot said, "What's this guy Purdue with 59 points doing going home?" Out! So I got kicked out of the 99th Division, the casual battalion, called Camp Calais staging area, which is on the plains above Marseille. The terrain there, it's where one of the glacier things ended, and it's all rock, except the dust from the rocks is in between. And there's a South African wind called the Mistral that blows up the Rhone River. And whenever the Mistral blows, that place is like talk about the Dust Bowl in the United States in the 1930s.
Wow, yeah.
I made the mistake of leaving my duffel bag open one day, and I came back with about this much dust on it.
My
anyway.
goodness sakes.
Anyway, it wasn't a lovely place. But anyway, I'm talking about Calais staging area. Well, we were there. I didn't have anything to do. I wasn't feeling good. My normal temperature was about 98. I was just completely worn out. So there was nothing to do, so I didn't do anything. If I slept all day, fine. If I got up for breakfast, fine. If I didn't, fine. Well, after a while, it gets to be old hat. So after about 3 weeks of doing nothing.
Did you have any entertainment there or anything?
No.
No USO or anything like that?
No. It was all transient.
Sure.
I went over to the orderly room and I said to whoever was in charge, I says, "I need something to do." And so he said, "Well, okay." He said, "They'll put you in the communications section, and your job is to lecture the returning GIs on their benefits under the GI Bill." So I boned up on that. So I'd lecture these guys. I never will forget, every class would be maybe 20 guys, The instructions were, when you finish the thing, then you ask them to re-enlist.
Oh, yeah.
Well, you can imagine how much luck we had with that. All these guys been through combat and stuff, and they'll tell them what a glorious future they're going to have, and then you ask if they want to re-enlist. I didn't do it. Anyway, because of that organization that was in charge of the orderly room, they'd get bulletins from headquarters and stuff, and one day, this is the main reason my only, quote, unique story really that I want to be sure got recorded. One day I saw this pamphlet that says, American University is opening in Europe 2 experimental colleges will be created in Biarritz, France, and Shrivenham, England, for returning GIs. Please apply such and such. I thought, that sounds interesting. So I applied. I was selected.
Good.
For Biarritz. Well, on October 20th, I left the Calais staging area by train for Biarritz. Well, I don't know what you know about Biarritz, but Biarritz is what they used to call the Côte d'Or, the Gold Coast.
Right.
And all the rich royalty people in Europe went to Côte d'Or, Biarritz, whereas other people went to Côte d'Azur, Nice and Cannes. That is fancy hotels that the kings and dukes stayed at. So here's old Jim, having spent the last 2 years in the mud and the dirt and the combat. All of a sudden, we're eating off of tables with chairs and tablecloths and silverware
and all that.
We're sleeping in rooms that were occupied by very fastidious people, and no formations. The only requirements are that you go to class. Now, from the academic standpoint, you could take anything you wanted, any subject you wanted to take. Partly because what the academia was trying to find out was, what are we going to have to prepare to teach these guys when they come back?
Sure.
Because they could see this flood, and they could see a lot of guys, and they're all right, we're going on to college under the GI Bill.
Good old GI Bill.
So the government, or at least the Army, was smart enough to prepare for that, at least to the extent they could, by creating these two universities. So they didn't require you to take anything. You had to take three subjects, I think. But I took psychology, which I'd never studied before. I took a course in economics and something else. But all you had to do is show up in class. Now, we weren't supposed to eat off of the economy because things were kind of pinched in France for food and stuff. Hey, GI chow, but nonetheless, it was a lot different than what I'd been used to. So I'll give you one of my anecdotes right now because I forget it. I had an adjoining room with a guy, his name was Riley, Sergeant Riley. And Riley was a musician. Riley played the piano with dance bands. He was a classical musician as well, and he could play jazz. He was a fun guy.
Where was he from?
I don't know.
Okay.
I think he was from Pennsylvania, but I'm not sure. I can't even remember his first name, by the way, either. Anyway, one Christmas, we went there, we were there November and December.
Right.
And Christmas time, we went over to the non-coms area club, and there were a bunch of guys sitting there playing music, pickup band, drums, cornet, piano, the usual, bass, combination, but 6 guys. They'd never seen each other. They're sitting there playing. Well, I'd play just enough piano to know. I don't understand how people can do that, but anyway. So Riley joined them. He took over the piano. Never seen these guys before. They're sitting there playing Christmas songs and jazzing up jingle bells and all that stuff. I don't know how they do that. They had a great time, And so that's the kind of guy he was. Anyway, the story I have about him is a couple of days, I guess it was a week or so after he got there, he says, I got a student. I said, oh? He said, yeah. He says, some man wanted his daughter to learn to play jazz. And so they recommended me. I said, oh, you got a girl or a student? Oh, yeah. He said, she's pretty nice looking. I said, okay. Mm-hmm. I said, you going to teach me anything more than jazz? He said, well, I don't know. So a week or so goes by, and Reddy comes into my room, and he shakes his head, he says, it'll never happen. I said, what do you mean? He says, that girl plays the piano, all right, but she will never be able to play jazz. She just hasn't got it.
Yeah.
I'll never forget that. Anyway, so we were there. Really, you can imagine what the contrast was between what I'd been doing and the 2 months I was at Burrett's. Now, to finish up my story, from there I went back to Calais, and January I came home, discharged from Indian Town Gap. Now, the thing I wanted to, I got to go a little bit more. When I got out of the Army, I was still unmarried. I went to UC at night. I'd been going to UC, and I'd get 2 and 4 and 6 credits a semester. It takes forever to get a degree that way.
Right.
So I went to the Central MCA, where they had a course in commerce, if you remember. At a school of commerce, it's a law school, Solomon P. Chase College of Law. The Solomon P. Chase College of Law was taught by active attorneys in Cincinnati, as opposed to professors at UC. All the guys were active professors. And they were kind of looked down on by the academic group, but there was a bunch of smart guys. So I went in there and talked to the dean of the YMCA College of Commerce and Law, intending to finish my commerce classes, which I started at UC. And Dean Hudson says to me, did you ever consider law school? I said, yeah, but I said, I don't have enough credit for law school. It'll take me forever to get there. I said, I don't think I can do that. Well, how many credits do you have? He said. I told him I had something like 40 something, and it took 60 to get into law school.
Mm-hmm.
He says, well, I can give you X number of credits for just being in the military. I said, oh, that's good.
Right.
He says, that's not quite enough. He says, did you ever go to any other academic courses while you were in the military? I said, yeah, I was 2 months at Barrett's, so that was enough.
Good.
So that's how I got into law school. I started law school in '46, and at that time there were so many guys that were taken that they started running it year-round, summer, winter. I graduated in February '50. I got married in between. I got married in '48. No kids, though, thank goodness, because you work all day, you read all weekend, So we didn't have any children to worry about. My wife was working. My wife married in 1948, was a Cincinnati's kindergarten teacher for 10 years. She taught school in Laurel Homes down Washburn School, down where the poor folks are. For 8 of those 10 years. 2 kids, 2 grandchildren. My grandson Robert is now 19. His sister Catherine, named after my wife, is now 15. Robert's going in sophomore at Miami U, just finished his freshman year. Catherine is a sophomore in high school at Sycamore. My grandson is a very capable boy. Among other things, he took a fancy to Japanese when he was in Sycamore, and took 3 years of Japanese. And he and his teammates won a prize, national prize, and then as a result, and part of that, he got a scholarship for 6 weeks in Japan, paid for, as a junior. And he continued on, and now he doesn't want to give up his Japanese, although he's going to be a physics engineering type, I think.
Really?
So this fall, beginning about 2 months from now, he goes back to Japan for 1 full semester, 1 full year of Japanese college, staying with a Japanese company, a family.
Right.
So he's quite a kid.
Well, that's, boy, he must
Anyway,
be bright.
he's, my wife passed away in June last year.
Oh, I'm sorry.
My wife had Alzheimer's disease.
How long were you married?
She was 87 when she passed away. My wife's, it was sad, it was I took care of my wife for about 1.5 years. Before she got so weak she couldn't walk and had to have a wheelchair, and then I had to turn her over to the care center. About 4.5 years altogether. It could have been a lot worse. My wife didn't have any diabetes, arthritis, or anything. It was painful. She wasn't suffering from anything. So she just
went down.
disappeared.
Yeah. Well,
Okay, now let's see, where was I? Anyway, the point I want to make about Barrett's, I don't know how many people know about Barrett's. I don't know whether there's a body of literature on that. I don't have a computer, so I didn't check Barrett's on the computer. But here's a program involving 2 schools where the government did everything right for a change. They anticipated the problem, they provided information on it, and they were reasonably prepared when the flood came, when the guys
Sure.
came back.
Well, you had a good background.
Now, I have quite a bit of material on Baritz there, which I can leave with you if you want.
Well, that's wonderful.
And you'll see that later. When I got through with Chase College, graduated, got a law degree and passed the bar on February 50, I had been working for Union Central all that time except for the time in the service. So I now have something to offer an employer, you know.
Right.
I'm no longer a $10 a week clerk. Union Central is the kind of a place that if you did your job right and stayed around for about 40 years and the boss didn't have enough of you, you wanted to get a job, you might get a pretty good job.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, not. Which is...
But you had your law degree. That was
Yeah, now I got my
important.
law degree. So I went and I got a
You
job
were a step above.
with GE in 53. I worked for another company in between. I quit GE I quit Union Central in 51. Graduated from law school in 50. Quit in 51, worked for a company, went to GE in 53. And I went into what was kind of you could call it a training program. Mm-hmm. We went in an organization called Organization and Procedures Planning, but what it really was they picked some guys they thought had potential, and you were expected to do that kind of work for a while, and after about a year, picked a field that you thought you wanted to go in.
Right.
Which I did. And so I wound up as a contract manager for the product support part of the military business at GE.
Mm-hmm.
Not a real big job, but worked like a dog. One of those jobs like payroll, you know, there's always something wrong somewhere.
So you knew-
5,000 paychecks, one's wrong, you haven't done the job.
Right, right.
So I worked in that job for about 7 years, and then, 57 to 63. And then there was a staff job open in Washington, D.C. for GE, which the head man was the Mr. GE Contract Negotiations. He was a guy that, was kind of a legendary figure in both GE and the government because he was the kind of a guy that, although he wasn't real far up later, whenever there was a problem with government procurement, the president of the company called Peck up and said, let's straighten this out. But he had a job open, we had 4 guys working for him, and their function basically was to make sure that all the other different departments in GE that were in the defense business were marching to the same drum, tell them what was coming down the pike, keep one department from ordering a given subject one way and the other guy the opposite way, you know, coordination of the,
Right.
a lot of phone calls, you know, vice and counsel. It's just my kind of job. No people to supervise, nothing. I supervise people with the other job. That's not my thing. You know.
Well,
So I went to Washington in '63 for 7 years.
I'll bet you enjoyed Washington.
Yeah, and my kids were just the right age to enjoy the uniqueness of Washington.
Yes.
And so when we came back, Richard was 11 and Nancy was 16. She didn't like being dislodged as a high school junior, but you know. But well, I'm glad we came back because about this point, Washington is so, what shall I say, too sophisticated for a lot of its high school kids.
Mm-hmm.
Porter Johnson High School had the highest percentage of merit scholarships and the highest incidence of pornographic incidents in the whole United States at the same time.
Where did you live in Washington?
Bethesda, northwest Washington.
Northwest, yeah. Well, that was a great experience for the children, but as you say, it was time to come back.
Well, we came back because Evendale here down the valley, its engine plant,
Yeah.
where I worked, had a new program they were working on. They called the A300B Airbus. You read about the Airbus.
Sure.
And it was kind of a unique arrangement. I won't go into that, but
Well,
they wanted to bring me back to be a head contract guy on that program, which he did
very good.
in
Well, James,
1970.
That's just great. So you knew a lot of the top people out there at GE, of course.
I didn't have a real high-level job, but I knew a lot of the top people
Yes.
because I was a guy that went along to make sure they didn't get themselves in too much trouble
They
with the
had to come
customer.
to you to get.
Does the name Harry Stonecipher mean anything to you?
Yes.
Well, I tell people, I've seen Harry Stonecipher in his underwear.
Well, this is wonderful, and we're
Brian Rowe,
Yeah,
you know,
sure, Brian.
and all those
And he
people.
died just last year.
I remember going to a meeting in Paris we negotiated with the French company, and we got down to, like the usual, 2 or 3 points that us guys couldn't resolve between us.
SNCMA, wasn't it
It was
SNCMA?
just the executive decision.
Yeah.
So we needed Brian Rowe to decide that. And so we set up this meeting in Paris, and his family he's English, you know, Brian Rowe, and he'd gone to England to visit his family, and then he'd gone over to Paris. So he got there before me and the other guys. So I had been charged with writing down the problem, you know. What's the issues? What do we recommend? So I had a lot of practice at doing that kind of thing because when I was in Washington, my boss would come in and say, Reggie Jones has got a meeting on the Potomac with the president of the Procurement Council, and these are the topics. Write up what we want to say about that, will you, Jim?
Right.
He says, remember, nothing more than 1 page. So I had a lot of, you know the joke, if I had more time, I could have written a shorter memo, you know.
Right.
So
Well,
I
James,
prepared
I got to tell you, we've run out of time.
Oh, yes?
And I'm sorry to say, I wish we had another hour, because you've got so many interesting things. You've had a wonderful life.
Well,
and we want to
I
thank.
thought it was going to be a little more than an hour.
Yeah.
Well, I've got my main lick, you know.
Yeah, that's right.
I guess the article summary says, how has it affected your life? First of all, I would never have been a lawyer if I hadn't been
Right.
in the military. And I think being in the military gave me more self-confidence than I
Yes,
had
exactly.
as a clerk at the insurance company, you know.
Yep.
Blah, blah, blah. I used to have a very perhaps respectful attitude toward authority,
Of course.
which is obvious, I guess, by now that I don't anymore. I got a whole bunch of little stories, anecdotes.
Well, I wish we had more time for them, but
Well, let me just tell you my favorite story. Our captain in the company was not very well liked, and the division had to have everybody qualify a 25-mile hike to go overseas. And the captain made it known that he didn't think he could make it because he had bad feet. And the word got around. So it was kind of a common consent. Everybody said, well, if the old man drops out, we're going to drop out. And so that word got around too, you see. So he apparently heard that. So he made it.
he did.
And the next day he went into the dispensary to the shave-tail lieutenant who doesn't care anything about military rank, you know. He's telling the doctor, lieutenant, how bad he feels, how sore his feet are, what a terrible time he had. And he gets all done, the lieutenant says, well, what did you come in here for, Captain? Sympathy or treatment?
Well, thank you very much.
Okay.
It's just a wonderful.
Well, you want to go over some of this stuff?
Yeah, Dennis will be very happy
Does
to.
Dennis want to do that? Okay.
Yeah. We want to thank you so much, James, for coming
Well-
in and doing this.
I hope
You've made an important contribution, and you'll get a DVD, you and your
Okay.
family, and one will go to the Library of Congress in Washington,
Ah,
and
yeah.
one will stay here in this library.
Good.
So
good.
you're in the archives.
I'm in the archive.
It's
yeah.
just wonderful
Well,
to make your acquaintance,
thank you.
and it's an honor.